Well, hello, Barrett. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great. How are you doing today?
I'm great. Thank you so much for being a part of this Course in Miracles. The whole issue, the interview, the chat from the beginning, you were right on board, and I absolutely love that. So
Yeah,
it's going to be fun.
you
Um,
bet.
a little bit about you. So I know you teach A Course in Miracles.
Mhm.
Tell me a little bit about your background.
Yeah, so I got into A Course in Miracles in 2006. I had heard about it a number of times just in spiritual authors' books that I've been reading. And it always seemed good. I always liked what I read. And so I picked it up in 2006. And when I first started reading it, it was like gobbledygook. I mean, I got some of it, but I kept reading the text, and what I would find I would do is I would just start falling asleep. So I'd read like a page, and then I'd fall asleep, and I'd read another page or two, and I'd fall asleep. And this happened like I don't know 3 or 4 times, and I'm like, I can't keep doing this. So I switched to the workbook. I started doing the workbook because that's more structured,
Uh-huh.
and that was enough to kind of get me into it. And then I really just fell in love. And then I read Gary Renard's Disappearance of the Universe as I was doing the workbook, and it was like light bulb, light bulb, light bulb. I really love this. This is exactly what I've been looking for, and I knew it was my spiritual path that I'd be doing the rest of my life.
Wow, that's awesome. Um, okay, me, curiosity, of course. Did you not, what was your experience when you first read it? I mean, besides the falling asleep, was it something that connected with you in your other previous spiritual readings and beliefs, or was it something that kind of threw you, okay, I wrapped my hand around it, now I can make the connection? How did that work out for you?
Yeah, it was kind of a combination of some of that because I definitely had been on a spiritual path for a number of years before I picked up A Course in Miracles. I'd been doing energy healing. I'd been learning about channeling. I'd been learning about, just I was a massage therapist. So I had a lot of these sort of spiritual pursuits in my life. And for me, what the course was is it kind of answered a lot of the unanswered questions because a lot of the different spiritual paths that I followed, they had something I liked. They had some message that God is loving, God is kind,
Mhm.
and they had some message about the power of the mind. But they all seemed sort of incomplete. And and then when I really got what A Course in Miracles was saying, I really felt like it answered all my questions. And I knew again at a very deep level that I was home. As I was doing the workbook, even throughout the whole experience, I would often just start to feel a lot more love and a lot more peace, and then my ego would come up and it would kind of make me feel anxious, and I would feel kind of resistant maybe for a few days, but I just kept coming back to it. And that perseverance, that persisting with it, really led me to experience that, okay, this is really taking me home, and that's what I want. And as you know, that home is really just our oneness in love, oneness in God, oneness in truth, whatever you want to name that oneness, that is what we're all moving towards.
Well, you definitely had more persistence than I did. So just quickly, I spoke about it the other video. I studied alternative medicine and complementary medicine. I did a 3-year program, and A Course in Miracles was a required reading and a required course. The timing, kind of like the Course in Miracles, the timing wasn't structured as to when I was supposed to read the book. So I left it for like maybe the 4th year. I postponed it as much as I could because I didn't get it. I honestly didn't get it.
Mhm.
And I remember sitting in class and they're talking about what we just talked about, the ego, the this, the that. In my mind, ego was a good thing. In psychology, they teach you that you should have a healthy ego. So here I am sitting in this class. They're talking about all these different things, and they're like, the ego is bad, and you can't. And I'm like, this doesn't make sense. So can you help us define in your own terms what we mean when the Course of Miracles says, "I got into my ego," or "let go of the ego," blah blah blah.
Yeah, the ego is really just the part of us that's attached to fear. I mean, plain and simple, that's what it is. Anything in us that is attached to fear is of the ego. And, the Course would contrast that with, again, the Course uses Christian terms like Holy Spirit. But again, if you don't like that term, you can substitute any other term you like. But the contrast with the ego is really that messenger of love, whatever form that takes. And we all have both of those inside of us. We all have the times where we choose fear, where we act out of unkindness, we act out of viciousness or attack. And then we all have those times where we choose kindness, we choose connection, we choose compassion. And everyone just sort of naturally knows this. You'd say that to anyone, everyone gets that. But what the Course does, I think, really, really clearly is it goes into what the ego is inside of us, what this part of us that believes in separation, which again is another definition for the ego, what this part of us that believes that we're separate from others, separate from the divine, separate from allness, what that part does, again, the Course helps us to see what that is so that we can start to choose against it. We can start to make better choices. And what that leads us to is it leads us to making more choices of love. And obviously, when we're making those inner choices, our outer life is going to start reflecting that more and more. So it's a process always of what's healing what's within, but the benefits do start to show up in our outer world as well.
And it's so true. It's a matter of, my experience with the Course in Miracles is a matter of, it took me a while to get what the ego was. It took me a while to figure out, what do you mean by the things I fear?
Mm.
Um, with me, I finally understood the book once I finally opened it and sat down with it after I had put it down a long time ago again, was when the things would make sense to me in my heart. And I kind of started letting go of my human mind, which is the way I define ego, is just that human nature conditional that we've been trained.
Yeah.
I kind of said, even though I don't get it, it feels good. And I think that's why I stuck to it the first few times before I gave it up a few more times. Because I've given it up plenty of times. But it's the way it makes me feel, and it does really connect to that unconditional love that I don't find anywhere else.
Mm-hmm.
And I am so a little bit about me. Yes, I studied all of that. I channel a lot through my writings. And I was younger, I did divination, and it was just the mystic and the subconscious and the psychology. I loved it. It's fascinating to me. And then when the Course in Miracles was introduced, it was more, well, I don't get any of that fun stuff I'm getting from other places. How does this work? But it was that. It was once I felt that connection, I can see everything else that I had studied and that I had learned or that I do. I see it with completely different eyes. And then I catch myself like a crazy person thinking, well, it's not me seeing this now. It's me through the Holy Spirit. But I would never have understood that before, ever. Now it's because of a Course, I see things so much differently. And I realize when I fall back into ego and problems, because I do, I see it now before I didn't.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Totally. Yeah. And I think this going deeper and then falling back into the ego is something we all experience. We all have this pattern of really committing more deeply to our awakening, committing more deeply to light and love, and then noticing how we kind of go back into the fear. We go back into the dysfunctional patterns in our life. And this is, I think, super normal. And I think it's really comforting to know this, because so many people, as they start out, then they fall back, they judge themselves for that falling back. They say, I'm doing it wrong, or I'm not dedicated enough. I'm not a good enough student. Whatever it is, people judge themselves. And we don't need to do that. We don't need to do that. We just notice when we're doing that, and then realize I can make a different choice. And it really is, that's all we need to do, again and again.
And again. And again. And it's also even coming into that awareness, into knowing that there's another way. There's another choice that can be done. I was explaining to a client the other day, it's stepping out of that whole vision of, is the glass half empty, is it half full? Step away from the glass entirely, and you're like, I don't even need to be there. I mean, what other choice can I do? What other things can be brought to me without me even realizing that they were there, and be open to them? And I think that's what a lot of the lessons, at least for me, the ones I've gotten to so far, have shown me. It's, wow, I never saw it that way. Or, oh, okay, that's a new way to think about X, Y, and Z. Because
Mhm.
the terminology in the course, and now I want to ask you, the terminology in the course, I find it difficult. I don't know if it's because I've been living in the US since '86. So I am Colombian
Mhm.
and I speak Spanish. And sometimes I would, my ego maybe, I would say, maybe I'm not translating this right. But no, I think in English.
Mhm.
I have my accent, but I understand. But this book, it just would not make sense to me.
Mhm.
How, when you help somebody go through the course, or they ask you, why is this lingo so complicated? What advice, or what do you talk to them about that?
Well, what I would say is don't worry too much if parts of it don't make sense. To just stick with it. One of the things our ego can do is it can kind of hook us into, I need to understand this sentence. I need to understand this paragraph. And it can kind of like bind us and we get really kind of stuck. So most of the time my suggestion is, if you want, you can come back to it again the next day and see if it makes any more sense. Sometimes it will. But a lot of times it's like, just let yourself keep going. And if you stick with it and you come back to it maybe in a month, or farther down the road, maybe it'll make more sense. Again, the book that I mentioned at the beginning, Disappearance of the Universe by Gary Renard, to me, it's the most helpful book to describe what A Course in Miracles is saying. Because it really explains A Course in Miracles metaphysics and principles behind it in plain English, which, as you said, the Course doesn't always speak in plain English. It's often in this sort of blank verse, this rhythmic, poetic sort of style. And the words are sort of designed to break down the walls in our mind, the fearful thoughts that we have. And sometimes as we're kind of butting up against something we're not familiar with or we don't understand, there's stress and resistance. So again, I would say that this experience you're naming is super normal. I think almost everyone has this to a certain extent with the course. Just know that you're not alone in it. Know that if you pick it up again, you might feel it makes a little more sense, or maybe not. And then I would just say set that part down and maybe read a different part of it, or just keep going.
And I think that's great advice, because I know a lot of people, even in my personal circle, that would buy the book because they've heard me talk about it, or they've taken a class and they're like, oh, wow, everybody talks about the love and I want to reach that and I want to understand it. And they'll come in, they're like, I tried reading the first page and I quit. And they won't go back. So I
Mhm.
think it's great that all of us can, that have gone through it, can actually tell people. And that's kind of one of the reasons I want this issue and this project to focus on is, sure, I'm a student of A Course in Miracles. It doesn't mean I'm great. You're a teacher of A Course in Miracles. It doesn't mean you didn't go through the hassle or you still don't go through certain things.
Mhm.
But for them to realize that it's normal. It's normal to be confused. It's normal to not understand it. I don't know if it's as normal as me that you just put it away and use it as a bookend on a shelf.
Sure.
but but
No,
but
I
it,
get that.
it's that you said at the beginning, it's you were persistent and you continued. And I think that's a great way of saying, even if you don't understand what's going on right away,
Mhm.
um it'll change something in you slowly but surely, if you trust it and you allow it.
Yeah. And that's actually an instruction in the introduction to the workbook itself. You know, the book says you may not agree or understand or believe everything that is being taught here. That's okay. Just do your best to do the practices in it, because those practices will start to undo the ego. They will start to help us release the fear that we have inside of us. And it's the experience of freedom from fear that we're all going for. Whatever we think consciously, that's the deeper thing that we want. We want to be free of fear. We want to live a life of happiness. And I think that that's an idea even beyond the course. In fact, it's one of my favorite things I've heard the Dalai Lama says, is he says, regardless of what your religion, regardless if you don't even have a religion, everyone on the planet wants to be happy. And that's how we are all the same. And I think that's very much in harmony with what A Course in Miracles is teaching us.
And I love that you just said that. The magazine is called Happier, Healthier Women. And when I started putting everything together, for me, I help people. I help women by empowering them. And I
Mm,
empower them in different ways.
mm,
And my magazine has taken quite a shift. It began with 6 topics that I believe are important to women. Makeup and hair are not included because for me, that's not important. It's fun, but
mhm,
it's besides the point. So my 6 categories were, parenting, financing, personal development, mind, body, spirit, et cetera, et cetera. And then throughout the years and with the coaching, I realized that if I go back to the name of my magazine and my mission to empower them, they need to be healthy, because if you're not healthy and you're physically feeling ill, we can talk blue in the face about the course, about spirituality, about energy healing. It'll go right over their head because they're physically hurting somewhere. And every person is different in what they need to be healthy. We'll leave it at that. But happiness is, you're right. You're absolutely right. And so is he. Everybody seeks happiness, whatever that happiness means to them.
yeah.
So when people hear that my magazine is called Happier, Healthier Women, and they ask me, how do you help them get happy? My first response is, I need to know what happiness means for them.
Mm,
Happiness can be an ice cream, or happiness, right? Happiness can be anything. It's a matter of, here are the tools. Where do you want to go to reach that so-called level of happiness? What does that look like for you? And a
mhm,
lot of people, I don't diagnose, I'm not a doctor, I'm not anything like that. But a lot of people with depression come to me because they understand that they're not happy, but they don't know what happy is.
mm,
Or they don't know how to get out of that endless sadness, which is what I call it,
yeah.
because they lost sight of it. And I think the way my magazine is focusing now and what I'm introducing now they're going to be very different topics, all because they all relate to that level of happiness and reaching a level of happiness in different ways. I took years trying to go through A Course in Miracles, and I still haven't finished it. I continue going.
Yeah.
But it's understanding, like, that feeling of unconditional love. Once you feel that,
Mm,
momentarily you stop feeling sad because you're so hugged by this invisible love, that love and sadness can't exist at the same time. So it's kind
mm,
of, and it goes back to A Course, because I believe, of course, one of the lessons said something like, if you're feeling this, you can't be feeling this, so choose.
mm,
Or that's what I took of it. But I was like, it's absolutely true. Once I help people find that they can find happiness somewhere, even if it's momentarily to begin with, then we've done a good part in reaching and allowing them to understand all these principles in whichever way we say them.
yeah. Another way I would just say it is that the truth of what all of us is love and light. The fear and the darkness is not the truth of what we are. We may have kind of gotten stuck in them. We sometimes for years, a lot of us get in these patterns that last for a really long time. That fear, that darkness is not the truth of any of us. The truth of us is only love. And when we really get that, when we start to accept that, our whole life just starts to shift. It just has to.
Right. I think that's awesome. Um, can we do a little process, like, based on that or based on something? Because I think all these concepts, just like the course, they're concepts that until we don't feel, we don't know what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd be happy to kind of lead us into this space. So you can just sort of settle into this moment and just let yourself get comfortable right where you are. And knowing this idea that what we are is pure love, pure peace. We're going to take an inner journey into this experience of our peace. So just let yourself feel that light is filling you. It may be a white light, or perhaps it has other colors to it. But just let this light fill you up completely. And as it fills you up, let it spill past even your skin and out into your aura. And as it starts to extend beyond the body, the edges of who you are start to soften. And the light just keeps on expanding, keeps on reaching and growing. And at a certain point, we actually feel that there is no edge to the light. The light just expands to infinity. There is no border to this light. There is no limit. This endless light is what you are. Feel the deep peace and joy that flows without any boundaries, without any barriers. And again, realize that this is what you are. Your real nature has no limits, has no edges. In this space of pure openness, there's nothing to fear. Because there is really nothing else. Just this beautiful state of pure, loving allness. Now let yourself simply breathe here for a little while. And if any thoughts of something other than love or kindness come into this space, let yourself allow that just to be, but perhaps it can just melt back into the love, melt back into the oneness. Continuing to take a few more deep breaths into this state of infinite love. And then letting yourself start to come back from this state of being, knowing that this spaciousness is always here. It's always something you can access. But as this meditation starts to come to a close, you feel yourself once again more fully in this body that we're very familiar with. But somehow the body itself feels a bit lighter. It feels more free. There's less tension or conflict within. And we carry this sense of light and love with us as we go beyond this meditation and out into the rest of our day.
Well, I kind of don't want to come back. Thank you. That was beautiful. And it's funny. It's the lightness that you talked about at the end. That's when you feel really you're not of this body and your consciousness and you're something more beyond. And it's the experience of going through it. So thank you.
Yeah.
So as we wrap up, if people want to learn more about you and want to listen to more meditations or recordings or talk to you, how can they reach you?
So there's two places people can go. One is a website that I've created about A Course in Miracles. It's an online school called miraclesu.org. So that's the word miracles, the letter U, then .org. That has classes that I lead on A Course in Miracles on there. It has other resources about the course that you can find. There's a lot of great stuff you can check out. And then I also do energy healing and past life clearing. And you can find out about everything that I'm doing at my other website, barrethedeen.com. Which is just my name, BarretHedeen.com. And yeah, those are the best ways to get a hold of me.
Awesome. Perfect. Thank you so much for this, for talking with us, participating, being a part of this project. Definitely reminding us of this lightness and love, which we sometimes forget because we get theoretical even when we talk about spirituality. So thank you. And I'll talk to you soon.
Sounds good. Thank you, Angie. This has been a really beautiful time. Have a great day.
Awesome.